Number 10, 1983 Chevrolet Corvette. Intended to reach the public in October 1982 for the 1983 model year, the C4 Chevy Corvette had everyone on the edge of their seats. GM, however, postponed the C4's public release. Due to some last-minute design changes and reliability concerns, GM decided to release the C4 Corvette in March 1983, and all the models sold from March 1983 onwards were marked as 1984 model year Corvettes. That said, Chevy did produce a handful of 1983 model year Corvettes that very few people know about. 61 units of the 83 model year to be exact, 18 of which were prototypes, and 43 were pilot line cars. Unfortunately, most 1983 model year Corvettes were destroyed before reaching the public. It's known that only one 1983 Chevrolet Corvette still exists. Number 9, 1967 Chevrolet Corvette L88. At first glance, the 1967 Chevy Corvette L88 looks like any other C2 Corvette. However, only 20 1967 model year examples of the L88 Corvette exist. These L88 Corvettes were extraordinary due to GM's mighty 427 cubic inch big block V8 engine, with a forged steel cross-drilled crankshaft, forged connecting rods, aluminum pistons, a higher compression ratio, a robust lifter camshaft, aluminum cylinder heads, and the largest Holley carburetor ever featured on a GM production engine. The L88 had 430 horsepower, but in reality, it didn't. Designed to only use high-octane fuel, the 1967 Chevy Corvette L88 made much more power than advertised. Many claim that the 67 Corvette L88's big block engine produces between 540 and 580 horsepower, which was miles ahead of all the other great muscle cars from the 60s, like the Mustang Shelby GT 500 and Dodge Charger. 1967 Corvette L89. To the average onlooker, the L89 Corvette and every other C2 Chevy Corvette look the same. The tri-power 427 cubic inch V8 that nests underneath the L89's hood made more power than the L88 on paper. The aluminum V8 engine also benefited from other goodies, such as bigger exhaust valves and a radiator shroud that ensured you wouldn't overheat at every second stoplight. Ironically, despite being more scarce than the aforementioned L88, the L89 is significantly cheaper than the more common L88. GM built the L88 Corvette with both lightness and sheer power, but also usability in mind. (1971) Chevrolet Corvette ZR2. Sporting a timeless design and one of the greatest American V8 engines of all time, the 454 cubic inch LS6 V8 engine, the 1971 Corvette ZR2 was one of the very last over-the-top sports cars built before American manufacturers needed to fit their cars with more eco-friendly engines in response to the oil crisis. But Chevy knew the lifetime of its gas-guzzling Corvette was limited, so the company went all out. The ZR2 package includes things like a Muncie M22 transmission, heavy-duty brakes, and larger anti-sway bars. It featured the same 454 cubic inch engine that the Chevelle SS utilized at the time, but GM reckoned it only had 425 horsepower. However, the Chevelle's 454 V8 had 450 horsepower on tap. Regardless of power figures, the old ZR2 Corvette clocked a 0 to 60 miles per hour time of just 5.3 seconds, and a quarter-mile time of 13.8 seconds. Number 6, 1969 to 1971 Chevrolet Corvette Baldwin Motion Phase 3 GT. Although it may not look like a Corvette at first glance, underneath its unique bodywork, it's still a C3 Corvette. Baldwin was to Chevy what Alpina is to BMW, an independent tuning company that specialized in certain models. In Baldwin's case, it was Corvettes. The Phase 3 GT was by far Baldwin Motion's most rare creation, as only 10 examples exist. Although the whereabouts of these exotic-looking classic Corvettes remain somewhat blurry, these muscle cars tend to hide in celebrity car collections. A few years back, a 1969 Phase 3 GT Baldwin Motion Corvette sold on Mecum for $121,000. 1971 Chevrolet Corvette ZR1 Coupe. It's difficult putting a price on a car that never reaches action. The last original 71 Corvette ZR1 sold at auction nearly a decade ago on Barrett-Jackson for $220,000. As previously mentioned, GM gave the public some of the most powerful production cars ever during the early 70s. Instead of fitting the 1971 Corvette ZR1 with that monstrous 454 big block engine, GM gave the ZR1 a gnarly 350 cubic inch V8 engine that produced 390 horsepower. Other remarkable features of the 71 ZR1 are body color roof panels, a removable rear window, rally wheels, and a luggage rack. Albeit not as powerful as the other Corvettes on this list, it was one of the rarest to come by with only 8 units in existence. The ZR1 name became so famous that Chevy featured it on many other Vette models over the years, including the rumored 2025 Chevrolet Corvette ZR1. Number 4. 1963 Chevrolet Corvette Grand Sport. Just like the famous Shelby Cobra 427, the classic Chevrolet Corvette Grand Sport is worth an obscene amount of money. Another thing these classic American cars have in common, though, is the sheer amount of replica cars plaguing the automotive space. Generally speaking, replica Corvette Grand Sport models sell for just over $100,000, but an original Grand Sport is priceless. GM originally intended to build 150 Grand Sport Corvettes to adhere to the homologation standards at the time for entry into the GT production class. That said, GM only built 5 cars before it changed the course of action because the company was no longer interested in racing. It's such a shame the 1963 Corvette Grand Sport never saw the likes of an actual racetrack. Maybe the Ford GT40 would have had a worthy adversary after all. (1986) Chevrolet Corvette in copper metallic. There's a stereotype that states that most Corvette owners claim their car is rare is because of its exterior color and interior trim combination. Although there is some truth to that statement, some Corvette owners are misinformed. If you were to own a 1986 Chevy Corvette finished in what Chevy called copper metallic, then you have a right to claim your car is rare. There were no significant engine modifications included in this color option, nor was it part of a special optional package. The copper metallic color was available during a few years of the C4's production run, but in 1986, only 4 Corvette buyers optioned it. Keep in mind that more than 35,000 1986 Corvettes were sold. Therefore, only a handful of the 1986 model year Corvettes were copper metallic. Number 2. The 1969 Chevrolet Corvette ZL1. It's not often that you can say a car is priceless, but this is the case with the following 2 Corvettes based on the C3 Corvette generation. Only 2 examples of the 1969 Chevrolet Corvette ZL1 left the factory, and these cars' values are dependent on what buyers are willing to pay. At an RM Sotheby's auction last year, one of these incredibly rare ZL1 models crossed the block and sold for $3.14 million. Powering this piece of American art is a 427 cubic inch L88 V8 mill. The ZL1 C3 Corvette came with all the performance upgrades the other, cheaper models did, like heavy-duty brakes and suspension, and lacked things like a radio and a heating system. Number 1. 1963 Chevrolet Corvette Rondine. The 1963 Chevrolet Corvette Rondine is like no other Corvette on the planet. Only one exists, and it was altered by none other than the Italian coach builders, Pininfarina. Back in the day, Pininfarina sculpted the most mesmerizing cars the world has ever seen, like the show-stopping Ferrari 308 GTB. The stunning Corvette Rondine made its first public appearance at the 1963 Paris Motor Show. After stealing the show at the Paris Motor Show, Chevy decided against hiring Pininfarina to make a fleet of Rondine Corvettes. Eventually, the only Chevrolet Corvette Rondine found a home at Pininfarina's museum until 2008. 2 years thereafter, the Rondine was auctioned off for $1.6 million. The cherry on the cake, however, is that contrary to what other cars on this list may have you believe, the Rondine's price isn't this absurd because of its engine. The Rondine Corvette had the exact same 327 cubic inch small block engine as the ordinary C2 Corvette. Sometimes you can judge a book by just its cover.